Merry Christmas to Michigan fans out there as they have hired their next head coach. Just saw right before recording this, it is official. Kyle Whittingham of Utah will be the head coach at Michigan next season. He has been hired. This is pretty important stuff here, Zach. We talked about this being probably the best possibility after Kenny Dillingham and Kayla DeBoer were no longer an option. Some people were still mentioning Jed Fish even after the background check thing. We're going to get into 3 reasons why Zach likes the hire, 3 reasons I dislike the hire. But at the end of the day, I think the thing we can agree on more than anything, Zach, is that this was probably the best Michigan was going to do in the situation they were in. We talked about this multiple times, got a lot of pushback from Michigan fans that said the program's in great shape, it's a top 5 job. And I even said it is a top 5 job when fully operational and everything's working. However, when you have a deadbeat AD, the regions aren't getting along, things are fractured, people aren't agreeing on things, and people are withholding NIL from Sharon Moore, it doesn't exactly paint the best picture for the next Michigan head coach. However, Michigan does go out and hire a Hall of Fame type of head coach in Kyle Whittingham, who did not retire, but did step down at Utah. Zach, before we get into the likes and dislikes, what was your first reaction when you saw this hire?
It saves a lot of consternation if they had actually gone ahead with Biff Poggi after the scathing remarks that he made a couple days ago. And if there was any chance that Biff Poggi had, I think it went up in flames on his on the Texas podcast. So it's good. It's a really I thought it was a good get out of jail get out of jail hire, which we'll talk about more.
For sure, for sure. Speaking of get out of jail, if anybody is at a family member's house this weekend and you need to get out of jail, don't worry, you can watch the Big Ten Huddle. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Okay. I'm at my parents' house right now, if you can't tell from not my normal background. And I've heard some people say when they're at the in-laws and things like that. But hopefully you like your in-laws and hopefully you like the Big Ten Huddle and you will like and subscribe to the Big Ten Huddle, covering everything in the Big Ten. Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. I mean, we put out Minnesota content. Okay, we put it all out there. We cover every single Big Ten team, and we appreciate you rocking with us. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on the hire, and if you agree with the things that Zach and I are going to say we like or dislike about the hire. Okay, Zach, let's go into your first like. Let's start off positive, and then I'll get into my negative Nancy-ness. What was the number one thing you like about this hire?
I'd say I feel like in the vein of Christmas, you are the Grinch and I am Santa Claus. I'm
But
just
I'm the
throwing
one
that out
wearing
there.
red, so
But Santa gets a day off after Christmas. I can wear black anyway. I said it at the beginning. It gets Michigan out of this death spiral because that's where this was going. And I know some people don't like the hire, and I think there are reasons to not like the hire. So all jokes aside about you being the Grinch, but the reality is the longer that this went, the more instability that was going to be there for recruits, for current players, for the athletic department. And so you get a guy, you end this saga, you get Biff Poggi to stop running his mouth, and like all those things are really good things. And you do it with a guy that has no more attachments after December 31st. So like no more attachments. He's fully locked in. I think that is a very, very good thing for Michigan moving forward.
I hear that, and I would say so I'll go to my number 2 reason I dislike it. I'll go and skip to that. I'll go back to the number 1 because it kinda refutes yours a little bit, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but I do wanna kinda add some more context and let the people in the comments decide on what they think is right or wrong. I'm concerned with him being as old as he is. The common thought process is, okay, yes, he's going to get us out of this kind of stuff, but you're going to be looking for a coach again in the next, 5 years at maximum, right? I don't think we're
Mhm.
thinking he's 66 years old. I don't think Kyle Whittingham has, maybe he does, Larry Johnson's still coaching at Ohio State, but he's a position coach, right? He's,
Right.
he's in his, I believe he's in his 70s and he's coaching there, but he's a position coach. Head coach is a whole nother animal. And so for me, I don't love the idea of Kyle Whittingham, being there possibly, for all these years. And it doesn't sound like to me Kyle Whittingham is the type of guy that's okay with just being like, okay, I'll just come in and you guys work on hiring somebody else. That was one of the reasons why he left Utah. right? Was he saying, if people don't want me around, I mean, that was literally one of the things he said. If people don't want me around, then I'm just gonna get out of here. I mean, he didn't say all that word for word, but basically that was a sentiment of like, if you're ready to move on from me, I'm gonna get out. Is he really gonna be comfortable with Michigan saying, well, we're good with you for like 2 years, but we don't want you year 3, 4, and 5 because you're older and maybe you don't connect as well with the players. Yes, you can be that bridge gap guy, but I don't know if Kyle Whittingham wants to be that bridge gap guy. A guy like him, with how disciplined he is, I mean, with how he still feels like he's probably a very good head coach, which I think he is. He did a good job with Utah this past year. They were what, number 15 in the nation? I mean, they
Mhm.
stopped still in the top 20 and everything. I don't think he's the type of guy that is gonna say, "Yeah, I'm cool with just, coming in and being your bridge gap guy for 2 years, and then I'll retire while you guys look for another coach." I think that could, add a little bit of stuff behind the scenes that could be, difficult to work with.
You're not wrong, but there's what Kyle Whittingham wants, and there's what Michigan needed, and what Michigan needed was to get out of this without having to hire Brian Kelly, and they did that.
Well, that's true. And I also wonder too, would it be better to go with Biff Poggi as an interim? Because I feel like Biff Poggi started saying that stuff because he knew he wasn't gonna get the job. He interviewed early on, and I think probably early on they said, "Look, Biff, we're gonna shoot straight with you. You're not getting this job." And I think that's probably when he said, "Well, I'm just gonna go out here and say whatever I want," which,
Yeah,
good for Biff. But, obviously people weren't happy with him speaking, you know,
yeah,
I don't wanna say completely truthful because not everybody agrees with him, but you know what I'm saying, like,
yeah.
speaking things the way he saw it to be, and I do wonder if maybe one interim year would give people the hope of a new coach is coming rather than, "We're gonna fully sign this guy on, the 66-year-old on as our head coach." I don't know. I think there are possible issues there. Um, yeah. Alright, what's your number 2 like, or do you wanna respond to that and then get
Well,
to yours?
I'll respond with my number 2, which is I think he is, if anything else, he is the highest floor coach that you could have hired in this cycle. Like, I would say higher floor, maybe outside of Kalen DeBoer, but even like Kenny Dillingham had what, 1 really good year or 1 fantastic year at Arizona State and then another decent year at Arizona State. All your other guys have been good, but Kyle Whittingham elevated Utah. Like, he's taken them through 3 different conferences and has succeeded in each of them and won the Pac-12. 1 year, wasn't, the Pac-12 was bad, but the 2nd year he won the Pac-12, it was in a very competitive conference, and he has been competitive all throughout his time at Utah. So I just think he is a high floor guy, which I know might be a rebuttal coming here, but at least he's not going to be a guy who puts you down into the dregs of the Big Ten like a Rich Rod or a Brady Hoke. Like, he is going to give you at least a healthy baseline so that if you do have to move on from him in 5 years or 3 years, at least you're not moving on from him because he tanked your program.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of similar stuff about him from the standpoint of, well, Sharon Moore can win 9 games. Imagine what Kyle Whittingham can do. I need to remind people about how easy the schedule was at Michigan this year. We talked about it.
It was
We
very
didn't
easy.
pick Michigan to make the playoffs because Michigan was a playoff caliber team. They're a very young team, but it was a perfect building year with a young team because you had the capability to make the playoffs with how terrible that schedule was. Look, all I'm not trying to take shots at any other Big Ten teams here or anything like that, but when your 3 toughest games are Ohio State at home, a game that you've won the past 4 years, at USC, and at Nebraska, that's that's a
It
really good
was
schedule in the Big Ten.
yeah.
So, I mean, you're looking at what, next year? I don't have the schedule in front of me, but off of memory, I'm pretty sure you're going maybe you can pull up the schedule. I can't pull it up here because the internet's not good enough. But you're looking at a schedule next year that has at Oregon, at Ohio State. I'm pretty sure you play Indiana and Iowa on that schedule as well. Like, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
Kyle Whittingham, good coach. He can make it happen. I don't think Sharon Moore would get any more than 8 wins in that season, but I think it's gonna be really tough going into next year with a much harder schedule after going
Yeah.
off a schedule this year.
Oklahoma at
Yeah,
home,
Oklahoma at home.
Indiana at home, Iowa at home. Penn State at home,
Oh,
Michigan State at home, Pat Fitzgerald coming in hot,
that's a
and
rivalry game.
then at Oregon and at Ohio State,
Yeah.
and at Minnesota, which is bringing back a lot of pieces.
Yeah, I mean, Minnesota's always tough to go to. So, look, I'm not saying that they're gonna go 6-6 next season or anything like that, but I do think next year is the test of that floor. What really is the floor of Michigan? Because I'm not saying they won't have talent, they will, but I think you can always bank on Michigan having talent. It's that schedule is gonna be difficult. All right, so my number 2 dislike reason, I'm gonna go with, I do wonder with him growing older, there's a lot of people talking about the resources at Michigan and how good the resources are and everything. Kyle Whittingham has never been a high resource guy. I think a lot of people look at these coaches at, the Big 12 and, some people have looked at like I don't want to bring up those teams because it sounds like I'm dogging on, 'em, but some people have brought up some of these other coaches and I voiced the same concern about Matt Campbell is that how is he going to deal with a highly resourced university with a lot of players making a lot of different money? Look, James Franklin couldn't deal with it. James Franklin was terrible at dealing with NIL and everything else. Sounds like Michigan's going to hold on to Sean McGee for Kyle Whittingham, which is excellent. But there's still a dynamic to that locker room with some guys making far more money than other guys. You're going to having a QB if Bryce Underwood stays. That's going to be making a ton of money, a lot more than some other guys on that roster. And sure, you might have some other guys making more, but how do you deal with the culture when some guys are making far more money than other guys? I think Matt Campbell's a little bit more attuned to it, so that's why I didn't freak out about it as much. But with Kyle Whittingham coaching in college football for all these years, no NIL, no paid players, and we know he wasn't paying players at Utah or anything like that, at least not that we heard of or was rumored about. What is that gonna look like at Michigan where they are making so much NIL, where they are, paying players big time? It was clear Sharon Moore wasn't doing a great job of dealing with it. I mean, he, had other stuff behind the scenes he was trying to deal with too. But how does Kyle Whittingham deal with it? He's obviously a great culture builder, but what does that culture look like with the influx of cash and the players making as much money as they are at Michigan? Because I'm one of these people that I don't think anybody can just come in and take care of that stuff. You got some guys like James Franklin who couldn't deal with it, and it was one of the reasons that it was, so detrimental for him at Penn State.
Yeah, I don't know if I would disagree with that take, but maybe the thing I might just point out, like, he did a good job at recruiting at Utah for a program as low profile as Utah. And it is Utah fans are gonna I don't know if Utah fans are gonna come onto this video and get mad. They have in the past, uh, particularly when we said BYU would be more attractive than Utah. That's still true, by the way.
Yeah, we are
Um,
not big with the Utah Utes,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
fine.
yeah. And this is gonna be another one where we're gonna get disliked to oblivion, but that's okay. Um, I but he's done it like, he had major recruiting wins, and that was with very little NIL. So I think you're right that there's a learning curve. I'm not sure though that he's gonna not handle it well, which I think leads to my third positive, which he may not handle the NIL perfectly, but he has the moral integrity to begin to make right what has been, in Biff Poggi's words, a malfunctioning organization over the past 5 years. And to me, I was like, when we talked about Whittingham and Brom, and I forget the other guy that was on our list, when we talked about them, I we didn't really talk about the integrity part, but I do think that is one of the most important things, maybe the most important thing that whoever was gonna be hired for this job had to do, was essentially to undo all of the crap that has gone on the past 5 years. And we've talked about scandal after scandal that's happened, and now it's both moral as well as competitive. And I think Kyle Whittingham has a track record of running a clean program. We know in college football, there really is no such thing as a clean program, but at the very least, he has run a tight ship. He is old school, and maybe there's negatives to that, but I think the biggest positive is he's gonna clean up a lot of the crap that's been left at Michigan.
I hear you on that, and I do think that is a positive. I also wonder, and this isn't my other thing I dislike, and this is just a wonder. I'm not saying this is fact, but I also wonder what does it look like playing the game in this new world, right? Because what do I always say every time somebody complains about tampering? You can't complain about tampering because guess what? Your team is
Everybody's
doing it
tampering.
too.
Yep,
Everybody's doing it. It's just some people are better at it than others. Right now, Miami is excellent at it. Miami's in the college football playoff, right?
yep,
Ohio State, pretty good at it. I know some Ohio State fans don't like it when I say that, but trust
yep.
me, they're pretty good at it. There's a reason why Chaz Coleman went into that transfer portal, and he's being favored to go to the Buckeyes right now. So, there are some programs that are good at it. There's certain programs that aren't. I don't know what Kyle Whittingham is gonna be like at it, and if that running a clean program, how that will go. So,
Well, can I just let's just be clear, quote unquote "tampering" isn't illegal because nobody actually, like, goes against it. Because as we've said ad nauseum, the NCAA stinks and they have no regulation. So, like, when I'm talking about clean program, I'm not talking about tampering because everybody does it. There's no regulation. So, like, I don't really care about that. I mean,
okay.
we should,
Right, we should.
but I'm he's not gonna run sign gate. He's not gonna sleep with a staffer. Like, that stuff is not gonna happen. At least I hope it doesn't, right?
I don't think Kyle Whittingham I scrubbed the, Instagram before coming on here. I don't think he's gonna be in the, Instagram models DMs. I'm kidding, I did not. I just am going off, knowledge there, so
Yeah.
alright, my last thing, that I dislike is that I think this is one that everybody is overlooking. I've not heard a single person reference this, and what was the number one thing that you and I said when we came on and was talking about this? The number one thing we said was you have to keep Bryce Underwood and you have to turn Bryce Underwood into an NFL. I mean, he's already an NFL talent, but you have to really, really show off his ability and hire somebody who can utilize him in a good way. It's one of the reasons why I kind of like the Jeff Brom talk. That's one of the reasons why I kind of like the Todd Monken talk. Zach, Kyle Whittingham has been at Utah since 2005 was his first season there. How many quarterbacks has Kyle Whittingham had drafted since being the head coach at Utah? 0. The last quarterback they had drafted was number 1 overall, Alex Smith, when guess who was there? Urban Meyer.
Urban. Yeah,
Exactly. So it might look like, "Oh, he did have 1 quarterback because the 2005 draft." Nope, that happens after the season. Urban was there in 2004, then he left to Florida. I Listen, he can bring in a great offensive coordinator. Don't get me wrong, okay? But as we've seen with somebody like even Kirk Ferentz, right? You can bring in an excellent offensive mind. That doesn't mean the quarterback position is going to get fixed right away. It
yeah,
might get fixed there at Michigan, but Bryce Underwood really struggled with development this season. Maybe they bring in a great offensive coordinator. Jason Beck is somebody that's being talked about right now. Guy over there, Devin Dempierre did have a good season. I think he had 25 touchdown passes, if I remember correctly. So it could go well, but I just look at this situation and say, are you wasting the talent of Bryce Underwood? Are you punting on him and just saying we're going to go full on Savion Hyder, which is fine if you want to go full on Savion Hyder, but I feel like you have
if he
too much money.
stays. If he
Yeah, if
stays.
he stays, which I feel like he would. I mean, Kyle Whittingham's gonna run a good running game with a good defense, and that's gonna be favorable to Hyder, I would think. Um, but that's kinda my concern because I do think that there was, talk about trying to adjust the perception of Michigan and them developing quarterbacks with Bryce Underwood. If you don't turn Bryce Underwood into a first round pick, you can turn him into a second or third round pick, but it's gonna really, really put a damper on things. If you don't take the hometown kid, number 1 recruit, everything, and turn him into a first round pick, he might get drafted first round, Anthony Richardson style, based off of traits alone, and that would be fine. I still think he's already a better quarterback than Anthony Richardson was, but the way I look at it, bringing in a guy who was coached at a program for 20 years and never had a single quarterback drafted in the NFL, when you have Bryce Underwood with, over $10 million connected to him, yeah, I got some concerns.
I do think you're right on that, and I think that is, we texted. I think there are good things about this hire, but I joked I was extra medium on it as in, like, I think there are some good things, and I think there are some not so good things, or some big question marks, maybe is a better way to put it, and I think that is the biggest question mark, is what's he gonna do with the current talent, in particular Bryce Underwood, because it's not just about developing him, it's can you keep the recruiting momentum along with him, which is the same concern I've had with, Raiola over at Nebraska now that he's leaving. What kind of impact is that gonna make on the rest of Nebraska? Because that was a big reason why a lot of people were going to Nebraska, and now he's gone. So what's that gonna do for their culture? What's that gonna do for, uh, their momentum? And I think it's the same thing with Michigan. So I do agree with you on that.
Well said. Well said. All right. Zach, any final thoughts or anything before we get out of here?
Um, every coaching hire is a wait and see. So, like, we do this, he could end up being a home run and get to the playoff next year. Or he could go 5 and 7 or 6 and 6. But we're really not gonna know. I think it's just helpful to be like, I think these are the things that we're seeing that we could see as both good things and not and potential pitfalls. So, yeah. But good for Michigan to get at least a proven name and that they didn't end up with Brian Kelly. 'Cause I know we've joked about that, but I do think that would have been a really bad way.
Merry Christmas, Michigan. You did not hire Brian Kelly trophy. Put it in the trophy case, and there you go. So thank you for watching and listening, everybody. Again, I'm JR, that's Zach, and we appreciate you being here. Have a good one. See you next time.